The first in a series. Today is the 5 protective factors. August 12th, we're going to be doing the 5 protective factors along with motivational interviewing, and that's going to be done by Caitlin Bowers. And September 9th is the third part, and that's the 5 protective factors and how they tie in with the FAST assessment, which should be pretty exciting. And that's going to be done by Shauna Boland. And then October is going to be a surprise. We're still working on the title for that one, so make sure you keep up with all the emails so you know what's coming up next. Before we get started on the 5 protective factors, I just want to emphasize how intertwined they all are with one another. So when we talk about one, you'll see how it connects to another one, to another one, to another one. So just keep that in mind, and we'll be bringing that up throughout the whole training. The way we have it broken down today is we're going to do a quick definition of each of the factors, and then we're going to go do a little bit deep dive into each one of them. And then the third part is that we're going to look at how we can work all that into our care planning. So our first protective factor is parental resilience, and really that is just how we all deal with our day-to-day, everyday little bitty stressors. Sometimes they're big and sometimes they're small, but how we deal with them, and to remember that our children are always watching us. The second one is social connections. This is probably my most favorite one, despite some of my more introverted friends who do not love this one. We're all social creatures, so we're going to talk about how those social connections are benefit to not just our families, but us as well. The third one is knowledge of parent and child development. You know, my baby, when I had kids, they did not come home with a manual or anything to tell me what to do. So we're going to talk about how do we come across that knowledge of how to parent and how to parent this child versus how to parent this child, as well as child development. The fourth one is concrete support in times of need, and this is really probably the most obvious reasons that a lot of families come to the attention of DCS. If we can help them alleviate some of that stress that are associated with food or housing or work or transportation or healthcare, how if we can help alleviate some of those and help them plan ahead, we can alleviate those stress and prevent the crisis before they ever come. The last one that we'll talk about today is social and emotional competence of children. So we want to help them improve that ability to form positive relationships and regulate their emotions as well as their behaviors. All right, so now that we've gone through our definitions, we're going to go through each of them separately and dig a little bit deeper. So the first one is parental resilience, and this is what I call the now what factor. You know, I've got 2 adult children, one is 24 and one is 21, and they've been out of my house and off my payroll for about a year now, which is really pretty exciting to me. But they're really learning what we all already know, and that adulting is hard. As my mom says, it's always something. There's always something happening, something going on, probably something going wrong as well. And me personally, I can handle the big things better than I can all those little bitty irritants that happen day in, day out, those million little stressors that pile on top of each other. In my family, we call it being nibbled to death by ducks. I don't know if anybody's heard that phrase, but we use that a lot. My son will text me in the morning. He's like, the ducks woke up and chose violence today, meaning he's just having a really rough day with all those little bitty things irritating him. So some of the irritants, like I said, can be big and some can be little. But what happens, how do you handle it when you've had a really rough day? How do you handle it when you're already late for work, the kids are late for school, you pile them in, and then you realize, oh my gosh, I've got a flat tire. I've got a friend of mine who's actually on here now who's having great stress. You know, we all like positive stress, having our kitchen remodeled. But all of those of us who have ever had any work done on our house know for a fact a screw is going to end up in your tire, right? It always happens. So drop in the chat, if you would, for me, what do you do when you've had those really rough days? As a matter of fact, yesterday, I was talking with somebody, and she told me on Friday, she was driving down the interstate, and her car stopped running, like the power started going out, so she was able to get off the interstate and get to a gas station, but she was late for trying to pick something up. Her son, and most importantly, her son was with her. and watching her, how she handled the situation. So resilience is really how we handle all these different situations. A lot of good things in the chat. Pray and say ugh. I think that has to be my favorite one now. Pray and ugh. Perfect. Yes. Talk to somebody. Take 5 and breathe. Go for a walk with my dog. Very good. Very good. So for our everyday actions, as we're working with our families, we want to help them understand that how they handle everything is how they help buffer their children in times of stress. We also want to honor each family's race, language, culture, history, and approach to parenting. Please remember that they are the experts on their family. They know what has worked in the past, and they know what has not worked. So that's where we need to start with them. Support them as the decision makers in the family, and help them build those decision-making skills. They're the experts on the family. Again, they know what works, and they absolutely know what does not work. We want to encourage them to manage their stress effectively and demonstrate it in how we handle ourselves with them as well. Social connections. Again, I think this is probably my most favorite one because I'm a very social person. The same screw in her tire friend is on here, and she is the most introverted person I probably have ever met. And much to her demise, she too is a social creature. We're all built to be social creatures. We need people. So this factor is what I call the who do you call factor. So going back to the screw in your tire, who do you call when something like that happens? When you've had that bad day, maybe when you're taking your dog for a walk, do you ever call somebody on the phone too? And going through, David Hall said he talks to family, staff, friends. So a lot of people were talking about reach out to friends for decompression, scream silently, count to 10. But who do you reach out to? Who do you call? So, and to celebrate the wins too. So drop in the chat who you call. I have a fabulous sister. She's probably my most favorite human in the world, and she also drives me the craziest. But she is my go-to person of who I can call. And I can call her with the wins too. Who can I tell something that when I get off of this call and I think it did really well, who am I going to call to say, hey, I did it, it's done, yay me, and I don't have to do this again for a little bit. My mother, my husband, good. Close cousin, all the people. AAA, all right, absolutely. That was funny because you're going to have somebody come fix your car. So we want to go in and we want to help families build and sustain and use those social connections. We'll talk a little bit later about some of the barriers some of our families have, but there's even a nonprofit called Safe Families that presented to us not too long ago that instead of maybe putting a child in foster care, they will host the children, like say the parents have to have like surgery or they need to go into rehab or something. Instead of the child going into foster care, they can go with a host family. But they use volunteers. So, usually it's kind of church-based, but one of the volunteer categories is friend, because a lot of the families that we work with don't have a good social support network. So they use friends in their program, and it can look like taking the family a meal. They can just be someone they can call, somebody they can go out to have coffee with. Anybody that anything you like to do with your friends, they're going to be there for the families that they serve. We also want to create an inclusive environment, let them know that everybody is valued. We're going to promote engagement in the community and participation in community activities. And each community, I cannot stress enough, is going to look very different. My friends over there in Memphis, your communities are going to look very different than Hamlin County or Sevier County. Sevier County is a beast all its own. And even in the same county, the communities are going to look different. In Hamlin County, we have a large Hispanic population. That support connections are going to look a lot different than in other parts of the state. So just promote and let them know that their community are valued. And we want to facilitate mutual support around parenting and other issues. So you see how the first one, the resilience, is also connected with social connections, because a lot of us called somebody when we needed that help. Knowledge of parenting and child development. Again, I mentioned before that I absolutely brought my child home and there was no manual attached to her. It was crazy. Ted and I got home, that's Ted's my husband, we got home with this baby and we looked at each other and said, well, now what do we do? We had no idea, and we could not believe that the hospital let us take this teeny tiny baby home with us. Like, didn't they know better that we had no idea what we were doing? So if you are a parent and you're on this call, I want you to drop in the chat, where do you learn to take care of your children? So as y'all are still working on it, absolutely. Natural instincts, trial and error, absolutely. A lot of us had really great parents and siblings growing up, and so we were able to pull from some of that. I was going through this presentation with a friend of mine. She's like, oh, I Google it. Well, I'm so old, Google wasn't a thing back then. So we just kind of winged it, trial and error, learned what worked, learned what didn't work. But think about the families that we get to work with due to intergenerational trauma, which we all know is real. They don't always have the best examples to look for. Some of them might very well know that this is how I was brought up and that was not okay, but they don't know what okay looks like. They don't know what they need to be striving for. They just know what they don't want to do. So keep that in mind. Oh, somebody has a sister-in-law that's a pediatrician. Nice, nice, very good. So when we go in there, we want to model developmentally appropriate actions with each of the children and the families that we get to work with. You know, how we treat the baby versus how we treat the toddler versus how we treat the teenagers in the home. Model that behavior for the family. We want to provide the information and resources on child development. You know, keep in mind, just like us, our families don't know what they don't know. Make sure you ask them, what about your child's behavior baffles you? We all have those moments with our children and we look at them and go, what planet did you come from? Why are you acting this way? We have no idea. Help them identify those gaps in their knowledge. I don't know why my child is acting this way or that way. And that way it gives us a place to start with helping them. All right, concrete support in times of need. To me, this piece is like a house of cards. If one support or one need gets pulled out of place, the whole house of cards is going to come tumbling down. Let's go back to the screw in our tire. If my friend that's on here that had the screw in her tire, she had just gotten new tires, by the way, so that was an extra piece of fun. She was able to go to the place where she just bought the tires, and they were able to remove the screw, patch it up, whatever they did to it, and she was on her way. It was a huge inconvenience, but she was able to do that. Let's look at some of our families. What if they don't have that resource? If the transportation is out of whack, you know, if they can't afford to have their oil changed consistently, which is expensive because I just had that done last week and it is crazy expensive. But if they can't take care of the oil in their car, then the car is going to stop working eventually. And if the car stops working, then they can't get to work. If they can't get to work, they lose their job. And if they lose their job, they can't pay for food or rent, housing, medicine, any of the things that needs to happen. So by helping them identify the current needs that they're going through, as well as to help them identify the resources to address those needs, it lowers the stress. We also want to provide the support that they need in thinking ahead. I had one family that came to the attention of DCS because of the housing needs. They had lost their housing and they were staying in a motel in a different county, but she still had her job, but she was concerned about her job. She had heard while they were there that they were talking about layoffs. So have her think ahead. What if the layoff happens? What can you do? And go ahead and plan that out ahead of time so it's not the crisis that it would be if it just came out of the blue. Same thing with cars. I know, for example, in Blount County, there's one church that does free oil changes once a month. Let's get them connected to that so we can keep their car running so they can keep going to work and keep paying for food and housing and health care and everything that they need. And you can also see how this piece connects to parental resilience as well as those social connections. How you handle all those little bitty things as they interact together, the car, the job, the food, all those things connect together. goes back to parental resilience as well. And I think, like I said before, this is the one that probably brings a family to the attention of DCS quite often. And it's been proven that the more stress a family is under, the more likely child abuse and neglect is likely to occur. So we want to keep that in mind and, again, help them, make them stronger, shore up these supports that they need even before they need them. The stronger we can make these protective factors, the stronger our families are going to be. And some of these supports in times of need are going to look different from community to community. There are great nonprofits out there who do nothing but help with food banks. Well, what if a community doesn't have a food bank? Well, that's when you need to know that, hey, did you know Bob at the First Baptist Church can help hook a family up with food if they really need it? We just need to go call Bob. If you're so busy working with your families, and we get that, you as frontline DCS professionals are really, really busy with your families, you don't know about Bob. Let us help you find the Bobs in your community that can help provide some of these needs. All right, and the last one for this section that we're going to talk about is the social and emotional competence of children. And this is that children learn daily from their interactions at schools, at daycares, at team sports, as well as at home. So this is communicating and expressing their emotions. And it also goes back to the developmental piece, because if you don't know that this could be normal behavior for your toddler, then how are you going to understand that this is where they need to be developmentally? And the one story I have about this, so my oldest was about, I'm going to say she was about 3, and my youngest was about 1, and my mom had come into town. They're from Alabama, and she had come in town for a week just to visit. And my oldest one, we'd gone to the grocery store, and she had the baby in the buggy, and my oldest one was having a complete and utter meltdown. And you know the type that I'm talking about, the type where all of a sudden your toddler doesn't even own bones, like they just become this limp jellyfish on the floor, right? She's screaming her head off. My mom had taken the baby, and they were already going shopping. So again, I knew developmentally that this was not uncommon. I knew her emotional competence was, this is what she was learning. She was learning how to express emotions. It was uncomfortable. It was unpleasant. It was actually really terrible. It's the type of, when you hear this happening 2 aisles over in the grocery store, the first thought is, oh, thank God that's not me. Well, that was me that day. So I scooped up this child with no bones, screaming her head off, and I go to find my mom and my son, and I go up to her, and I was like, you finish shopping. We're going to go wait in the car for you. And y'all, I swear to you, my mother looked me dead in the eye and said, do I know you? And I'm like, thanks, Mom, appreciate it. So she and I walked out, and 20 years later, y'all, we still laugh about this. But that's where she was socially and emotionally. And again, it goes back to the parental resilience. I had the support of my mom, sort of, anyway. But let's take that same story and switch it to maybe one of our families. What if I didn't have my mom in town to help me? What if I had a single mom with 2 kids and 2 jobs, and this is the only time this week I had to get to the grocery store? I wasn't even sure I could pay for the groceries when I got done, and here my child is having this complete meltdown. Again, remember we talked about the increase of stress on a family increases the likelihood of abuse and neglect. So that same scenario could have looked very different if I was in a different situation. So they have to gain that practice to learn to regulate their emotion. And again, it ties into that childhood development. So we want to help the family understand what is going on and help that child develop appropriately. We're going to model nurturing support to the children. That's scooping my child up and taking her outside until she could finally calm down. She was probably tired or hungry, and to be fair, I'm not much better when I'm tired and hungry either. We want to respond correctly and help the family, again, understand what's going on. We want to include their social and emotional development in all that we are working with the family. All right, so what we know is that families gain what they need to be successful when key protective factors are robust in their lives as well as the community. Just because they might have some risk factors, it means it's fact that they have the risk factors, but it's not fate that family might have negative health outcomes or negative outcomes. Somebody switched to Walmart parking lot because of that. All right, thank you, Terry. You make me feel a whole lot better. So again, just remember, when we're talking to our families, they are the experts in their families. They know what works, they know what doesn't, but helping them understand how all these things are tied together is so important. How important, you say? Well, I'm glad you asked. So we're going to talk about incorporating the protective factors into our case planning. So the parental resilience in the FAST. You want to make sure you're looking at their resilience from a strengths-based perspective. I have one friend that works with families, and every time she met a new family and would go into their home, the first thing she said is, what am I going to love about working with little Johnny? Or what am I going to love about working with your family? What are the good things that this family has going for it? A lot of times our families don't think that way. They don't often get asked that way. They hear more about what they're doing wrong than what they're doing right. But remember, they're the experts of their family. They know what works, they know what doesn't. So make sure you're coming at these questions from a strengths-based perspective. What's worked for them before? What skills did they use? What area would they like to see strengthened? If they can identify what areas they want to see strengthened, what coping skills they need to work on, what stress behavior, what behaviors can they improve on to handle certain stressors. If they have the buy-in, if they identify it, they're going to be more likely to actually work towards the goals that are being set in the case plans. Social connections in the FAST planning. Again, this is probably my favorite factor, is the social connections. So we want to have the family identify their existing connections. What family do they have nearby? What friends do they have? What social supports? But it's so important, y'all, to evaluate the quality of those connections. They could easily have 10 family members within a 5-mile radius, and they don't speak to one of them. And if you're saying, okay, so tell me, can you call your mom to watch the kids while you go to work? And she says, no, then you need to take her at her word. A lot of the families that we get to work with have once or twice burnt a bridge or two, as we all may have done. And they have no desire to work on the quality of that connection. Okay, meet them where they are. If that is not something they are even willing to talk about or work on, then guess what? They are absolutely not going to work on that. So help them identify the gaps where they need this support. What are some places that in their community that they might be willing to do and go to and invest in? I remember when my kids were little, I went to a MOPS group, which stood for Mothers of Preschoolers. So it gave me that social connection. I was so excited, y'all, to actually finish a sentence. It was crazy. Developmental knowledge. I was able to learn from other moms where they were. We even had competitions in the morning of who changed the most diapers before we ever got to the place. Is there a church nearby that they can become involved in? Again, a lot of churches, Bob would know about the food banks, but there's a church down the street from here that also has a diaper ministry. They don't advertise this diaper ministry. You just kind of have to know about it. So if they're involved in a church, that can be the social connections that they need that they don't really get from their family. So again, have them identify the connections and the gaps that they're willing to work on, so they're really interested and have the buy-in to reach out and work on their goals. Knowledge of parent and child development. Again, it's important to get the parents' buy-in and identifying the areas that they need the help with. Ask them what baffles you about your child's behavior. Let's start from there. Again, what are you doing well as a parent, and where do you see the areas that you need to strengthen and beef up? Because as we all know, children's behavior can swing wildly. And again, what are they doing well? If they start with that, then again, they're going to have more buy-in. And each community is going to have, we talked earlier about that, I think that was a question in the chat, about the tools for different parenting and child development. Are there things they can read? Are there different evidence-based programming like PCIT or MST that we can connect them to help them learn more about their parenting styles and their child's development. Concrete needs and concrete support in times of needs. We talked about this. I cannot stress enough, ask them to identify not just their immediate needs, that's very important, of course, but once that immediate crisis is over and they're back to more stable, have them start thinking ahead. If we throw a resource guide at them, they're going to say thank you very much, and they're going to chunk it in a drawer, and the next crisis is going to come, and they're going to forget completely about the resource guide that they got chunked in the drawer, right? But if they can work through it ahead of time with you, step by step, who do we call? Do you remember that Bob was helpful with the food last time? Maybe Bob knows of where we can get some diapers. Make sure they have all that connection set up on the front end so they don't necessarily need us again, that they can do it again. It goes again back to the parental resilience. What barriers do they have? Transportation is always a huge barrier for a lot of our more rural communities, for sure. Language barriers, like I said, in Hamblin County. Cultural barriers. They may not speak the language, and they may not have the same cultural norms as a lot of us do. One of my coworkers was working with a Hispanic population and learned that the men have the decision-making skills, and even young boys, when they reach a certain age, trump the moms in the decision-making department. So how can we support them in those times, even if it means a little different? So where are those supports for that population in that community, in their community? Social and emotional competence of children. So we want, again, go in, ask, what am I going to love about working with your child? Where are they in their current skill set? And the one thing about this slide that I love the most is you really want to learn to talk to the parents and the teachers and get the teachers' feedback. Go talk to the schools. Go talk to the daycare providers. Go talk to the coaches. The more information you can gather in different settings, the more well-rounded picture of where that child is socially and emotionally that you'll have. One example is in Anderson County here in East Tennessee. I was meeting with the school social workers, and they specifically asked for a meet and greet with the DCS frontline professionals so they can get to know them. So when they have a concern of a child, they know who to call. And when DCS is working with a family, they know that they can go to them and get all the information they can from that different setting. How is that child in school? How's that child in sports? You know, go talk to the coaches just to get a full picture. And then that will help you determine different areas of need. Again, if the families are identifying the areas of need, they've got a lot more buy-in, and the goals that are set are theirs, so there's going to be a lot more engagement. So why have we just gone through all these protective factors? Again, it's fact, it's not fate. So what we hope to do with this training, and as you're working with the families, is we want to strengthen the families that we get to work with. We want those children to optimal child development. We want them to be the best that they can. And the reason we all get up out of the bed in the morning is we want to reduce the likelihood of child abuse and neglect. And as I open it up for any questions in the chat, I'm going to leave this up here for just a little minute to remind us that children don't grow up in programs. They grow up in families and communities. The stronger we can make the families and the communities, the more safe, stable, nurturing environment our children get to grow up in, the stronger and the better they're going to be. And we're going to have better communities because of it.